Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about human emotion and the way we navigate this life of trials and triggers and treasures with the help of astrology and tarot. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, and an Akashic Records reader, and I'm here to help you do this messy life with as much grace, ease, and pleasure as possible. Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 6, card 5, the Hierophant today. This is a Taurus card, and technically this is my card. And my relationship with the Hierophant is kind of interesting because I go through phases with it where I feel really close to it and where it just kind of makes sense to me and I vibe with it and I feel it. And then I go through periods where I feel really disconnected from it. And I kind of went through both today. I was really tired. I was up really late last night, and so I didn't kind of enter the day from a usual headspace with my usual sleep. And that actually added to the experience because I was disoriented enough to be really anxious at various points in the day and then to have to kind of intentionally ground myself. And I do think that the Hierophant can be a really grounding energy. Again, connected to Taurus, it is fixed earth. And so there's this sense of stability, but also a sense of faith that comes with the Hierophant. It's often like a spiritual teacher or a mentor or someone who passes down wisdom. And the oracle card that I pulled today, in addition to my daily pull, was teachers. And then I did my yoga class and the instructor was talking about how sometimes, this wasn't my yoga class, this was my meditation. The guide was talking about how often it's less about what we need to add to our life and more about what we need to remove from our life in order to progress and to grow. And that felt so interesting coming off of the Emperor messages yesterday about self-improvement and like self-assessment and self-awareness. And so today I was really thinking about what I'm ready to let go of. And before I sat down for my tarot practice, I was at my altar and the offering that I made to Venus was prayer. And I've mentioned it before on here, I think, that I use Caitlin Grania's Offerings Oracle deck, linked below if you're interested. And I pull an offering suggestion from that deck every single day when I'm connecting with different deities and guides. And so the message was prayer, and I prayed, and I connected with Venus for a while, and then I came over for my tarot practice and I'd forgotten what this Hierophant card actually looked like. And it has 2 hands that are in prayer. And when I was really tuning into the imagery of the portals Hierophant, it has 2 like old school kind of antique looking keys that are up toward the top of this like window into a sunny sky that has some clouds, but it's really calm and peaceful. And there are 2 hands that are pressed together in prayer that are in that center sort of portal or window into this beautiful place. But then when you look around that window, the sky that's surrounding it looks kind of scary and daunting. And so there's this contrast here of how our outside circumstances can feel scary and overwhelming, and they can trigger anxiety and fear. And coming back to prayer, and that can be completely non-denominational, but coming back to prayer can be really powerful. You can pray to Venus like I did. You can pray to your guides. You can pray to your ancestors or whatever spirits and whatever people you work with. And for a lot of us who have religious trauma, which has been on my mind for the past 24 hours and coming up a lot in conversation, it's kind of like my own experience divesting from Christianity and finding my way into my spiritual practices. I was on a friend's podcast this morning, and we ended up talking about that a little bit and just like the path there. And it all felt like really aligned, like having these various conversations around people's religious upbringing, and people have been reflecting on that in Discord too. And the connection to kind of unpacking the Hierophant as this religious symbol, this like traditional religious symbol. The Hierophant's often connected to institutions too, and to like the institution of marriage, for instance. And that's something I've been thinking about too. I've never been married, and I, as far as 33, I'm almost 34-year-old humans go, I have fewer commitments than a lot of people my age. I don't have children. I have a dog. I have me, and I have my business and my home and other, all my relationships. I manage a Discord community. I have all of these people who count on me, but it's different, right? Like it's not the typical structures of responsibility that we're often kind of led down in life. And so I'm just thinking about like responsibility and how there can be a devotional relationship that we have to responsibility that can make it more of like an act of service that can feel spiritual in its own way. The way that you think about like sweeping the floors and cleaning the counters and preparing meals can all be really beautiful and sacred tasks. And then there's this sort of like more traditional expressions of devotion that come through prayer, that come through worship and all of this other stuff. And then acts of devotion, big and small, like making commitments, like getting married or like buying a home or signing a contract. And it's just swimming in my brain. And honestly, I don't have very structured thoughts about it today. It's just that like this idea of responsibility is really coming up, and with that, integrity and values. And that makes a lot of sense for the Hierophant, and it makes a lot of sense for Taurus, being a Venus-ruled sign that often is very rooted in personal values. And that's been a long journey for me to discover my own values and then to start choosing differently, to start making the active choice to commit. And sometimes coming back to the idea of commitments, that commitment is to ourselves. It's that I'm going to feel a whole lot better if I live in accordance with my values. And whoever you worship doesn't really matter so much if you're coming back to that place of values, to personal values. And so it brings me around again to my oracle cards, again, the teachers, and then I also had connection come up. And just thinking about the ways that like various interactions with people in our lives can offer these teaching moments where we see ourselves behave in a certain way, and we might have awareness of a pattern that we don't really want to keep repeating. And it can be hard to shift that because those paths are really well worn, and like literally the neural pathways can be very well worn, and they can keep us stuck in old patterns that feel hard to break free from. And it's something that I spoke to Jay about. I was like holding back because it's kind of, I don't know, I guess technically still kind of a surprise that I'm going to be on this podcast. But it's Jasmine's astrology that I'm going to be on their podcast. So I'm excited about that. And you should go follow Jasmine. Jasmine's awesome. They go by Jay. Anyway, so I was on their podcast this morning, and we were just like talking about parts work and internal family systems, which is a practice that I utilize in my own astrology practice and my divination practice. And I was certified in 2022, I guess it was, and how a lot of the work that we do with that is connecting with these various parts of ourselves that carry burdens and that have their own fears and their own hopes and wishes and strategies for keeping us safe, and how those can often be in conflict with one another and can create this internal tension that keeps us really stuck in place. And that tension can be really frustrating, but it can also be really generative at times, because when we notice a pattern repeating itself over and over and over, that's like a loud flare or a bright flare, I guess, and a loud signal that's going off that's alerting us to exactly where that exists. And then we can go to that place. You know, the flare is shot off, and we can go find that spot within us. We can go find that part within us that's needing our attention. And I was thinking about that in the context of my Venus in Pisces, and we talked about that a little bit on the pod. And just like how my values have adapted. I often think about my Venus and Pisces experiences as my relationships and the stuff that I've been through in relationships, but the way that my values, my personal values, can be very idealistic in a Venus and Pisces way, where I'll often hold myself to unrealistic standards and then get really dejected when I don't meet them. And so I've been trying to loosen up on the moralism lately, and that's finally bringing me back to where I really wanted to dig in here, which is around religious stuff and religious programming and trauma, and how this idea for so many of us from various religions, organized religions, but especially with Catholicism and Christianity, the guilt complex and the feeling of being inherently bad, more so with Catholicism. And on my dad's side, my family is split between Filipino and Irish Catholic. And so there was a lot of that. And then from my mom's side too, there's also Catholicism. And so it's like heavy, heavy, heavy programming around that stuff. And something that I've really actively tried to break free from, especially in the last like 15 years, really since leaving for college, I started re-examining a lot of my beliefs around all sorts of things, including my politics and my worldviews, my ideologies, my values. And the religious stuff had been on the back burner for so long that I didn't really consider it a part of that picture until I deepened my understanding of white supremacy and its relationship to like Christian nationalism. And it really started churning at that point that a lot of the more bigoted beliefs that I was raised with and that were still kind of churning within me, a lot of that was also a product of the religious beliefs that I was raised with. And so it's just got me thinking about morals and values and the difference between the two, and how when we pray, we're praying to someone or something, and we can make choices about the sort of like foundation that those prayers come from. Like, are they coming from a place of guilt? Are they coming from a place of hope and compassion? And I found that when I got back into praying after many, 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 many years of not praying, because I sort of rejected everything that felt even mildly religious for most of my young adulthood. But when I returned to spiritual practices in my like mid to late 20s, I gradually began praying again, and mostly because it felt like a necessity during really difficult times. And it was just the comfort and familiarity of coming back to something that felt cozy in a way, even if it was a little complicated. And so that came up today when I was praying, and I prayed for something that I like really wished for myself, and something that required me to kind of like get past the voice that was also simultaneously judging me for like wanting anything and trying to kind of keep me in a place of scarcity. And that comes up a lot when I connect with my guides, is that I'll often approach it from a place of already feeling guilty about asking for things. And then my prayer and my asks are infused with this energy of guilt and scarcity. And so today I like really tried to flip that on its head and approach it from a place of like, we're in a reciprocal relationship. I give so much to the spirits that I work with, and it can be more of like a gentle, I don't even know if expectation is the right word, but like a gentle invitation to receive in kind. And I'm trying to do that more and more, to get into a real flow of reciprocity with the spirits that I work with, and to not kind of reinforce this idea that I have to be self-sacrificial in order to be well and in order to be good, because that's the like old shit. So teaching moments, speaking of the teacher's card, the exercise we did today was free writing, and I ended up writing a poem that I'm not comfortable sharing because it's really personal, but I might end up sharing it later on Instagram. Who knows? Maybe I'll feel spicy. But it felt really good to get in that flow again, because I was like writing stuff that brought up those pangs of judgment, and then I was able to just move through it and to sort of find the flow and just keep going. And that was lovely. And then my song was Nobody Gets Me Like You by SZA. And it's a song about like this person that she has a lot of love for, but who's obviously broken her heart in some way, but she still like desires them so much. And the repeat line is like, nobody gets me like you. And then also, I don't want to see you with anybody but me. And that's something that feels achy for me and icky. It sounds like icky. It's achy and icky. Because I've dealt with a lot of jealousy throughout my life, and I'm a Taurus, so I can be possessive, and I've worked on it a lot, and I've freed myself from a lot of the like attachment baggage and the insecurities, and healed a lot of that stuff. But it still comes up at times, and I really I love SZA so much, and I always appreciate the sort of scorpionic, intense honesty that a lot of her songs contain, where she really drags the shadow into the light, and it's healing for other people and cathartic for other people to hear it, because she just speaks truth and speaks to stuff that a lot of people are afraid to talk about, that a lot of people would shy away from and back away from because of not wanting to be perceived a certain kind of way. And she just goes in, and I respect her so much for that and love her music. And it just, again, brought me into that like idea of shame, and how there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves often as humans, and especially in progressive circles, to like not experience bad emotions about things that are supposed to be good. And this happens a lot in some like non-monogamous circles too, where there can be some shame that's placed on jealousy. And it's hardly, if anything, non-monogamy is confronting a lot of that and working to heal a lot of that. But it's where I see the most conversations about jealousy and possessiveness, and those qualities can be perceived as like bad to a lot of people. And it really kind of, it makes it harder for us to engage with that stuff, and that stuff becomes stickier the more judgment we place on it. And so what I'm feeling, again, from the Hierophant, going back to my initial message here that I got from my meditation, was around really relieving ourselves of something. And so it might not be, what do I have to add to my life in order to move forward, in order to grow? It's like, what am I ready to lift from my shoulders, and maybe to get some help in lifting? Recognizing I don't have to do this all alone. I can enlist help from the unseen. I can enlist help from mentors and teachers. And I can refer to people who help me hold myself with compassion, as opposed to with judgment and disdain and like shame. So all stuff that I'm chewing on, and today feels more serious and kind of solemn as opposed to like my saucy Empress episode the other day. But it's what's here, and that's what I got. So I will be back tomorrow, and I hope you all have a really beautiful Friday. Happy Venus Day.